I want to bring in Brent Beecham now, who is a former pilot. You're still flying, Brent, or are you
Nope,
just doing real estate now?
just doing real estate.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. I saw that and I said I got to get Brent on because put yourself in a wing commander position. What do you
Right.
do? You got all your aircraft lined up on the ramp, just like at Pearl Harbor, and you see this. I mean, how do you react? What do you do?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about this in that same regard, but I was watching a YouTube guy yesterday, a former F-16 pilot, and he
Mm-hmm.
was talking about all the Chinese land or the Chinese had purchased land next to military bases. And, at the time I was thinking when they announced all those kinds of things, it was to spy on us or whatever. But
Yeah.
this kind of brings it in whole different light. Like they
Wow.
could sabotage us very quickly from very close.
That's an interesting point. Haven't even thought of it. They probably already have
Yeah.
it in place, right? I would think
Yeah.
there needs to be some raids on some of this stuff and start looking at what they got in the barn.
Right. Yeah. It's terrifying. And I think there's a lot of people in the Pentagon and, like you said, at lots of bases that are thinking about, today, what do we do? I mean, when we were at Langley, all the airplanes were on the flight line. They were uncovered,
Mm-hmm.
no hardening of shelters, or you could hide the airplanes in. And how long would it take to put a couple of drones on that and basically
Yeah.
wipe out an entire wing? It
Yeah.
wouldn't take much, and they
I
they
have
just
been worried
proved
about
that.
this. Yeah, I have been worried about this for a long time. And if,
Yeah.
if I can see it, young captain who got out and just looking at it from
Right.
where's been our leadership? I mean, why they didn't see this, or they intentionally didn't do it, or just it was too expensive, or they didn't want to think about it. That's what not an officer is
Yeah.
not supposed to act. They're supposed to think ahead, right? Stay ahead of
Yeah.
the airplane, as we used
Well,
to
I
say.
well, I think that if you look at every military disaster in history, it's a failure of
Mhm,
imagination, whether it be Pearl Harbor or 9/11,
mhm,
that nobody saw that as a possible outcome. And the interesting thing was that, and again, this was they used the wire guided UAVs.
mhm.
So, the idea of trying to jam a remote vehicle would have been whatever countermeasures you might have had would have been defeated by that, because
Right.
they were flying by wire. And so now that's a whole nother issue. How far can those fly with a wire? Is that a 1 kilometer limit to them? Do you have to then start thinking about how do we clear everything from whatever that distance is?
Well, there's been a lot of reporting in this video all over the web about in Ukraine, the fields are just littered with fiber optic cable because it's
Right.
all gone that direction. And I read, if I could be wrong, but some of them were going like multiple kilometers.
Right.
So, I mean, and it's very tiny wire. You can barely see it, but
Yeah. Well,
that's what they're
well,
doing.
a lot of the anti-tank weapons are the same thing. So I mean, we obviously that's the technology that's existed for a long time,
Mhm.
and provides very accurate and unjammable communications with a missile. And
Mhm.
obviously, it's the same thing with the UAV. This whole, like, and I know there was a lot of people that kind of poo-pooed what Elon Musk had said early on, was that the age of fighters and all that is, warfare's changed. We don't need all these expensive systems. We can just fly drones. And obviously there are some limitations to what you can do with drones, but this just proved that warfare's changed, no less than when the tank was introduced in World War One. Um,
Overnight changed.
Overnight. And we've been watching this on the sidelines, this drone warfare going back and forth, but nobody saw that as a strategic weapon. It was a tactical weapon to be used in the battlefield, and to be able to basically take out a significant portion of the Russian
Mhm.
nuclear bomber fleet. I mean, can you imagine if we lost a third of the B-1s, B-52s, and B-2s overnight? I mean,
Well, we've only got what 20 something operational B2s. Of course, we may have more at Nellis and some secret. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
just
mean,
to
what
me,
would
that's
our
the novel.
reaction be? I mean, what would our reaction be? And I think that's the scarier part in all of this
Hmm.
is the Russians haven't responded just yet.
Yeah,
And I'm sure there's calls for this to be not, just a couple of ballistic missiles on Kiev. I think there's a real risk of this turning to a tactical nuke or
well, they said
something
this
like that.
morning that there's not going to be any peace. It's off the table now. That was
Yeah.
probably the goal of all this, by the way, was to
Yeah.
torpedo any peace negotiations.
Right.
Um, I think the only answer is for Trump to just say, "We're done. We're backing out.
Yeah.
Europe, you take care of it." And that's the only way forward, in my opinion, because we don't want to be in a war with Russia. We just
No.
don't.
No.
If the EU wants to destroy itself, go ahead. But
Right.
and maybe that's what they want. But
Yeah.
uh,
I don't think Russia is a massive threat to Western Europe. They don't have
I
the
agree.
logistics. Poland probably would defeat them in the battlefield, hands down, by
Mhm.
themselves. Um, but the other part about this UAV thing is the number of these things flying around that you can buy in a toy store, online, whatever. The threat, given what we're seeing now, whether it be at Columbia or Harvard with these pro Hamas supporters, with people that are firebombing protests
Yeah,
with Molotov cocktails. I mean, take that and start throwing around the UAVs and into that, and they're low cost. Hamas, if you watched early videos from October 7th, they had hand grenades that they attached to the UAVs, and they just would drop them into
yeah,
the,
very
the
very simple technology.
yeah.
Yeah, and very
It's
effective.
Yeah, and they've had airports shut down in various locations. The UK had Heathrow was shut down over a couple of days when they had drones flying around the airport.
Hmm.
Those probably were not something that was nefarious, but what if they were? And could you take one of those drones and smash it into an airliner? Yeah,
Yes.
you'd have to be a very good pilot to do that, and I mean drone pilot. But you could put it into an engine. You could put it through the cockpit window. Um, you got some
Yeah,
real serious situations.
and then the economic damage is what people aren't
Yeah,
seeing, because if you hit 20 places at once across the US in an economic that airports,
yeah,
daycares, malls, grocery stores, whatever, that shuts down. Nobody's going to leave their
yeah.
house.
Well, remember
So,
the DC shooter. I mean, how
mhm,
many people stopped going to public places, even though it was even though it was very localized to the DC area? People around America were freaking out.
mhm,
9/11 did. I mean, obviously did significant damage, but the damage was far, far, far reaching beyond New York, Manhattan, the Twin Towers.
mhm.
The economic situation across America was affected for a period of time. If these things started going off in various locations, I'd guarantee you people would be staying home, um, and locking down, trying to avoid any kind of situation where they would be at risk,
Yeah.
and that would significantly impact the economy.
Brent, I'm going to take a quick break. Can you stay for one more segment?
I
I'll be
can.
right back. We'll talk about some of the wars. Be right back. Stay with us on the skiff.
Your government doesn't care about you. That's why you need a medical emergency kit. It contains life-saving medications like ivermectin, Z-Pak, and antibiotics. Stock them before they block them.
True life Alp story. I got a call from a friend of mine yesterday, honestly, true story, who said his girlfriend had just broken up with him over Alp. He wouldn't stop. And I thought to myself, that's kind of sad. And he said, no, it's not sad. Imagine if I'd married her. Now I know I was saved. Then the next day, this same friend is driving at twice the speed limit through a major American city, pulled over by a cop in a speed trap. Cop takes his license registration, goes back to the patrol car, runs him, comes back, looks in the window, and sees a tin of Alp on the dashboard. Pauses, stunned, says to my friend, you use Alp? Yeah, I do, says my friend. So do I, says the cop. We all do. He looks at my friend thoughtfully and goes, Drive safely, sir, and hands back his license and registration. No ticket! So in 2 days, he's saved from a tragic marriage to a girl who doesn't like Alp and a speeding ticket. All true. It's more than a nicotine marriage.
Welcome back to the Skiff. I'm here with Brent Beecham, former classmate of mine, not former classmate, but classmate, and a former F-15 pilot and A4 pilot, and airline pilot, but now a real estate developer in Atlanta. Real quick, what's going on in Hotlanta, man? What's the vibe down there?
Well, I think that the outer suburbs, and I'd reluctantly call them suburbs. They're more cities that have reemerged, particularly on the northern arc, have really gone gangbusters. It's a hot place to be, and real estate continues.
Alpharetta, Roswell, Dunwoody, that whole area.
Yeah, Woodstock even. Which I would have listed maybe number 10 in our cities 20 years ago. And it's really, some very progressive leadership in various cities. And we've kind of distanced ourselves from Atlanta, particularly, post BLM riots. That's really have reemerged them as independent cities.
Have you, what's your thoughts on, there's been a lot of press recently about American, I guess, mercenary F-16 guys going over and flying for Ukraine. Do you know anybody that's done that?
I don't know anybody. It seems like a really bad idea.
Yeah, that would be a bad decision. Yeah.
Yeah. You can imagine if we were to lose a pilot and captured by the Russians, Francis Gary Powers all over again.
Yeah, totally. What about, let's talk Middle East. You have a lot of experience there. I mean, the Yemenis are still firing ballistic missiles up toward Ben Gurion Airport. Most of them have been shot down, a few of getting through. Syria is there. I think the Israelis are trying to figure out how to deal with Syria. Golani is saying we want peace, but in the meantime, there's projectiles being fired into the Golan Heights. So what's going on there?
So Yemen is an interesting story still, and I don't understand if that's still being directed by Iran or if they're being resupplied by Iran or if they're just using their last ballistic missiles. But the last 3 days, every single day, weapon fired. It's always at night, always to disrupt. The Arrow 3 air defense missile defense system works really well, and they've shot down basically everything that's come in. The last time that they had one that actually hit, I believe, and I think this is a story that needs to be looked at some point. The initial engagement was with the U.S. THAAD missile defense system, and it failed. And I believe that probably the Israeli Air Force then activated their secondary defense, maybe an Arrow 2 or David Sling, or maybe the Iron Dome, and so it wasn't able to engage it fully before it hit. If THAAD failed, then I don't know if you know this, but the Arrow defense system was created as a backup to THAAD in the event that
that's an Israeli
failed. Yes,
Arrow is Israeli. Yeah,
and the Israelis did not want to rely on a missile hitting a missile. They wanted an explosive charge that if they got close enough, and it's a directed charge, so it can actually be directed in a off bore sight method to take it out. So if they got close enough, they can hit with the shaped charge. The THAAD, if it misses, it just misses. There is no explosive in it, and I think
that's interesting.
I think that if I were guessing, I'm guessing the Israeli defense forces are saying, you know what, you can shoot that if you feel like it, but we're going to use our Arrow 3 to take these down. I mean, I think it's a good thing to have if the Iranians, shoot another 100, 200 ballistic missiles. You can't have enough, missiles in the air to take them down. But on a one-off, once a day, I think Israel's just going to rely on itself to take care of it.
Well, that's probably a good thing, right? I mean, just to
Yeah.
have a domestic capability.
Yeah.
What about any thoughts? Obviously, the Iranians are dragging this out. Trump is trying to get a deal. There's a lot of discussion over enrichment of uranium. Any thoughts on? I mean, would the Israelis do a strike on their own? I guess is the real question.
Yeah,
In support.
I think so. I think the big question is, are they? They're going to have to give President Trump time to sort this out, and I think they'd be foolish to act while that was ongoing. But if they run into if they run into a roadblock in these negotiations, I think Israel probably has to think it's time to strike. Now Netanyahu's had that opportunity, and I think he's probably had the green light a number of times and failed to act. And I don't know if that was
green light from Trump.
Well, from Trump or previously
Yeah.
when the 45th administration, I think they had a green light to go. Biden may have given them a green light, but I think that they've a number of times have failed to act out of fear. And Netanyahu comes off as a war hawk and whatnot, but I think in all reality, he's more afraid of failure and what it would do to him politically than he is confident in the success of the Israeli Air Force. Now that might have changed when they went over end of last year and bombed Iran with the Israeli Air Force unopposed. Basically, I think they could do a sustained multi-day attack and have no response from the Iranians to take them out.
Yeah, interesting. So they have the force structure and the reserves to do that, you think?
Yeah.
Huh. What about Netanyahu? What's going on with Bibi? Politically, it's criminally. I mean, there's a lot happening, a lot of currents going on there. What's your sense?
Well, my initial thought was this was kind of a Trump situation. And I think a lot of people in America, particularly conservatives, say, well, just like they use lawfare against President Trump, they're using it against Netanyahu. I think it's a little deeper than that, and I think Netanyahu there's a lot more than just some smoke. I think there's fire. The ongoing conflict has kind of delayed some of that, and he's making the argument you can't have elections, you can't have a trial while the war is going on. And
there's a reason for that, I guess.
yeah. But he's deeply unpopular, and particularly the coalition partners he has makes him look even worse.
Yeah.
And I think that
you're talking Smotrich and Gavir and those guys.
Yeah, and Gavir's like they're horrible people, and I just nobody stood up in the center and presented themselves as a viable candidate to beat him. And he is a master politician, if nothing else. He knows how to get the right group of people together to keep himself in power. But there's a point in which you've been in power for so long that you're just a little bit arrogant about that power.
That's when you make mistakes.
Yeah,
I think. Any thoughts on Gaza? You want to talk about that at all? I mean, it's a mess, man. I don't see how the other side gets out of this. It's a mess.
Well, and again, I'm probably going to have some of my Israeli friends of mine throw darts at me after this, but this, the idea that the hostages are the preeminent concern, and obviously, if it's your kid, it is your only concern. But if they don't defeat Hamas in some way, shape, or form, and there's going to be another set of family members, another 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the line, they're going to be facing the same situation, and so the battle has to be won, and that may be, and I don't think you can just defeat them militarily, but Gaza has been flattened. I mean, if
I
you've
know, there's
seen,
nothing left. I mean, it's and that's intentional, right? I mean, it was
yeah,
flat. I mean, there is nowhere to live. I
right.
mean, so I don't know what.
But the idea that this is a genocide is ridiculous. If
Yeah.
in fact there's a genocide, why aren't Arab neighbors like Egypt opening the doors open and say, "Hey, come over and we'll help you"?
Mm-hmm.
You know, where is the,
Egypt, for instance. Yeah.
right? And if they're starving, then why is Hamas sitting on loads of food that they're hoarding and actually shooting at their own, citizens who've become a lot more aggressive recently, not just towards Americans that are handing out food aid, but
Mm-hmm.
also against Hamas. They've
Yeah, I've
had
seen them.
some attacks on Hamas run facilities, but the Western press and the progressives in America and throughout the West have fallen for this time and again. Pallywood makes
Mhm.
the best stories, and they show over and over again. The same story ran about this doctor who had 9 kids
Mhm.
that were killed. It's the same story run from 2022, the same pictures, the same
Mhm.
everything, and people keep making it sound like this is a brand new story.
'Cause it
And
works. I mean, the propaganda
yeah,
works. There's a low information voter out there.
yeah,
So,
yeah, and
that's
they're falling for it on all these campuses across America, and I don't know how we come back from this. It's a scary situation to think that, again, elite universities, how you want to define that, elite universities have fallen to these progressives. And if we thought that the Vietnam era protests and some of the terrorism that happened back in that period, it did happen. They bombed, the Capitol building and
Mhm.
that kind of thing. But I think this is far deeper and far worse. These are people who have fallen for a terrorist organization, and they're supporting them wholeheartedly with no reservation. And they're absolutely,
I think the Trump administration has realized that. I think
yeah,
they're facing it. Whether they'll actually deal with the problem, I don't know. But, what I can't understand is, the what the left, if you wanna call it that, the
right,
Marxists, the cabal, whatever that's pushing all this. I mean, they're using them as kind of brown shirts. I guess I'm trying to
yes,
understand the concept of, is it just to destroy Western civilization, or is it, because these people are going to be a problem for them at some
yeah.
point, and maybe they just don't care because they know what's coming. I don't know.
Yeah, I think probably like say the Democrats that are,
Mhm.
the Schiffs and the
Mhm.
Pelosi's and whatnot have used them as a weapon
Mhm.
against conservatives, against the Republican Party, the
Mhm.
MAGA movement. I think within the hardcore left and within those student movements, they truly believe America is an evil place that needs to be destroyed.
Mhm.
And I think that that's probably the most dangerous thing of all of this is
Mhm.
it. And you ask them what's their alternative, they don't have one. If it's such a horrible place, why do we have 20 million people trying to break through the gates to get
Yeah.
in here every day?
Mm.
So
That is.
it's a bad situation. I don't know how you undo what these people have been trained to believe about America.
Yeah. Last question. Markets, real estate. What are you seeing in the real estate markets with mortgage rates and all that?
I think we're stuck right now until things are a little bit more clear about tariffs. And Powell has been sitting on interest rates for a bit, and
Mhm.
unwilling to move them. But I do think that if we could get rid of the Fed, or
Mhm.
if you just said, "Hey, the Fed, here's your rules. You can move interest rates between 3% and 5%." There's some natural number that that is like reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
and we got really used to basically 0% interest.
That's true. That was intentional
And
to keep them at zero too for so long.
yeah,
The Fed was doing
and
that. That's quite obvious.
yeah, and it created a bubble, and every time you skew things like that, you do create bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to get used to the idea that, my first mortgage when I moved back to Atlanta was, I think, 7%.
Yeah, I remember 7, 8,
And
9%. Very
yeah,
30 years ago, 40 years
and
ago.
my dad had 18% interest loan on his house in
But
1970,
they also had the
whatever.
economy that would support a job to support
Right,
that. So
right.
the
Yeah,
income. Yeah.
that's the thing, is that if you look at all the statistics now, it says that in actually Depression era America,
Mhm.
it was like 3 years of salary could buy a house cash,
Yeah.
and now it's like 7 or 8 or 10 years. So
Yeah.
we've really, really lost the power, and I think that, again, that was all intentional as well.
Yes. Yes.
That's the reason why we have low wage, immigrants from Latin America that come here. Is it's to keep the economy, to have the appearance that the economy is okay,
Yeah.
and we can buy cheap things, and we can have cheap labor to mow our lawn or whatever. But we're masking the loss of our income and the power that we have. Like if my dad was a sole income
Mm-hmm.
in our family, and we lived a great life, and now it takes two to make to barely make it, and
Brett, yeah, I love
not
having
good.
you on because you're
Yeah,
like the perfect guest. I can talk like multiple subjects. I can talk war. I can talk flying.
yeah,
I can talk economics. It's travel
right.
around the world. It's all good. I just bring Brent on. He'll do it. Thanks, my man. I appreciate it. We'll see you
uh,
next.
Thank
All right.
you.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye.
See you.